Retro Rewind Highlight.
Hello, I'm here to talk about Donkey Kong Country, the 2D platformer from Rare Studios, with computer-generated graphics that were developed using tech that was acquired from the purchase of SGI stations, or Silicon Graphics International stations. This technology caught the attention of Nintendo, who was impressed with the game Brute Force that Rare had been working on previously, and this is how it all began. This is one of my favorite SNES games of all time, and I must have played it to finish at least 7 or 8 times. It was a game that I would try to speedrun, even though I'm not sure if I was to look back now, I probably wasn't as fast as I thought I was. Donkey Kong Country had a striking resemblance to my favorite Mario games that I had played before, in its core gameplay, so it was no surprise to find out that the gameplay was heavily inspired by Super Mario Bros. 3. This was very easy to see with all the collectibles, secret areas, and even a world map that they threw in to navigate Donkey Kong through the game from level to level. Now, I was clearly the target audience for this game, and Nintendo was going to make sure that I played it. The marketing campaign Nintendo launched was an absolute assault on the eyes and ears of kids all over the world. Donkey Kong Country was everywhere you looked. If you didn't see the ads at Walmart or Babbage's, which is GameStop for all of you born after 1999, then you were getting a VHS tape from Nintendo Power in the mail. That's right, Nintendo sent out a VHS to its Nintendo Power subscribers, which was unheard of before then. This was the Nintendo Direct of the 90s, and it was so successful that Nintendo continued to do so throughout the N64 era as well. So by the time I had watched my VHS and read through issue 66 of Nintendo Power over and over again, I wouldn't actually get my hands on my own copy of this game until late 1995, which was almost a year after it released in 1994. Now let's talk a little bit more about Donkey Kong Country's development. Rare started development of Donkey Kong Country in 1993, and it was meant to be a competitor to Sega's Aladdin. So if you remember, I mentioned earlier that Rare had purchased some SGI stations to start rendering 3D models for new experimental games they were developing. One of those games impressed Nintendo so much that they asked Rare to revive a long-dormant franchise that hadn't seen a new release since 1983. This is when Nintendo mailed them a banana bunch, and the rest was history. I'm joking, of course, about the bananas, but this was a true revival of the Donkey Kong franchise, and Nintendo has never looked back since. The franchise saw 2 sequels to Donkey Kong Country on the SNES alone. Now that Rare got the keys to Donkey Kong, the tedious work and long hours would come hard and fast, as Donkey Kong Country would only take 18 months to complete. This was a phenomenal feat, as this was one of the first games to feature CGI graphics, and this pushed the team to get very creative. This required Rare to figure out a way to compress their newly made 3D renderings into sprites that would fit on an SNES cartridge, because the single SGI screen used more memory than an entire SNES cartridge in its original format. This process was called Advanced Computer Modeling, or ACM. With that out of the way, let's get to the design of the game. Now, this was the first time that Shigeru Miyamoto wasn't directly involved with the directing or production of a Donkey Kong game. That's not to say that his input wasn't there. He was very insistent that the new design of Donkey Kong would have an article of clothing that would define his character, similar to how iconic Mario's hat has become. So that's how Donkey Kong got his bright red tie that we're all very used to seeing him wear today. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the level design was inspired by Super Mario, and Rare wanted to try to figure out a way to have some type of power-up similar to Mario, and this is how we get Dinky Kong. And did I just say Dinky Kong? I think I meant Diddy Kong, right? Diddy was added to the game as a sidekick, and to give the player the feeling that they had a friend playing the game with them. This was met with a hitch from Nintendo, as this character was going to be Donkey Kong Jr., but Nintendo felt his rendering was too distant from the original Donkey Kong Jr., so Rare was presented with an ultimatum: either re-render him to look more like the original, or design your own character to fit into the new Donkey Kong universe. So Rare chose the latter, and that's how we got Donkey Kong. Or at least we would have if not for legal complications that led us to actually getting Diddy Kong. Now we just need some bad guys, right? Rare originally intended to use Wario as the main antagonist of the game, but again, Nintendo was more interested in having Rare develop their own Donkey Kong universe. So this led to them using some scrapped characters from a different game called Johnny Blastoff and the Kremling Armada. The Kremlings just seemed to fit the bill for the game, so their designs were reworked and lightened up, and that's how we got the infamous King K. Rool. Now this is where we talk about my absolute favorite part of the game, the wonderful music provided by the legendary David Weiss, along with a few tracks from Evelyn Fisher. I remember firing Donkey Kong Country up for the first time and just being blown away by how ambient the music felt, and how tightly it was woven into the fabric of the game. There's not a single track that I would change. Each level was made just that much more magical by the addition of this music as you swung or rolled through a level. It also helped with the fluidity of the gameplay that starts to develop as you become better and faster at seeing the moves that you need to make next as you make your way to finish. Now I can't talk about the music of Donkey Kong Country without mentioning aquatic ambience, with its slow build-up into an almost industrial sound, and then add in all that synth glory. This music was a major defining element to an already outstanding game. As I try to roll this up, I would like to say how amazed I was at how well Donkey Kong Country has aged. It still feels great to play, and the SGI graphics hold up splendidly, as was promised to Nintendo, who was looking for a game that would hold up for 20 years down the road. I really hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about this amazing game. Now go out and play it any way you can. Luckily, it's a very accessible game in this day and age, and here's where you can play it. Donkey Kong Country can be played on the following: SNES. This is the original cart and is still fairly cheap. Game Boy Color. This is the first remake of the game, and it's just a little bit harder to find than the SNES cart. Obviously, you can play this anywhere where a Game Boy Color game can be played, so if you're still rocking your GameCube with a Game Boy player, that's also an option. Game Boy Advance or DS. This is the second remake and probably the cheapest way to get a physical version of this game. And same as the Game Boy Color, you can play this anywhere that a GBA game can be played. Wii Virtual Console. So this is the SNES version, but you can only play it if you were able to purchase and download before they close the service down. 3DS Virtual Console. This is also the SNES version, but can only be played on new 3DS and new 2DS. Wii U Virtual Console. This is again the SNES version, and as with all mentioned before virtual consoles, this is probably the cheapest way to play the game. SNES Classic. If you were lucky to find one or pick one up at some point, you can play it there. Nintendo Switch. This game has been added to the SNES app, but requires a subscription to the Nintendo Switch Online. Probably the easiest way to play this game. It also gives you the ability to rewind if you get in a hard place. So this is a very accessible game, and basically the only way you can't play this is if 1, you own an N64 only, or if you own a Wii and you missed out on buying it before the service closed. Well, thanks for watching. Later.